and people are trying to consider themselves independent, and including journalists. Maybe they were the first ones who declared themselves independent. Maybe in reality, and actually they weren't independent, but they declared themselves independent. And I think that this moment is very positive, that to consider when someone considers himself independent while he isn't independent in the system, and but he thinks that he is independent. And I think this is the most positive step. And from this step, he can write, he can think like an independent person.
Let me ask you about yourself, then I'll ask Mr. Effros to respond. Do you feel sitting here that you can say anything you want?
Yes.
You're not at all worried that somebody in the Russian embassy will be watching this and...
Absolutely. I've been getting rid of this kind of fear almost until recently. I had some fear, and in previous years, when several years ago, I feared. I just simply had a simple feeling of fear, and sometimes I didn't think about it. But when I realized that it is true, it is not true, and I feared to say it out loud. It was a natural feeling for me, like I'm fearing of when I'm just when at the point of getting robbed, or when I just at the point of to go to a place where I don't know anyone. And it was just a natural feeling of fear. And sometimes it's real disgusting when when I don't feel fear in my material way, but in my spirit, when my spirit is in fear, when I cannot express myself properly. And luckily, I have now. I can say whatever I want.
Reaction.
Well, I agree with what Vitaly is saying. I didn't intend to intimate that the independence that has happened is not tremendously important, and it has changed the entire face of the countries that are now developing over there. Indeed, it was a Soviet professor who was suggesting that they don't have journalists yet, not me. I met some who I believe were true journalists of the first order. Sergei Korzon, who was the fellow who started Echo Radio in Moscow.
What's Echo Radio?
It was at that time a pirate radio station that informed Moscow of what was going on during the coup attempt.
Ron Nesson of Westwood One, and it owns Mutual and radio, NBC Radio, sat right here a couple of days ago and said that that company is doing a joint venture in radio stations. I think he said 3 of them over in Moscow. Does that sound like that's going to be?
There's all sorts of activity going on. That's the fascinating part of the distinction between what Vitaly was talking about and what I'm talking about. The journalists are so much freer today than they've ever been, but the structure doesn't exist yet to assure that they can continue to be free. And the legal structures and the economic structures we're more used to here as the constraining factors. You know, it's your boss who tells you, wait, the advertiser doesn't want us to talk about that, you know. That they haven't experienced that yet, and we're trying to help them design the laws so that they don't have to experience it.
Both of our guests will be here for about another 25 minutes or so, and then we show you TV Inform, the Channel 1 newscast that was seen earlier today in the capital city of Russia, Moscow. And Nicholas Palugin will be our guest at 6:30 if you're watching this live. That's East Coast time. He is a journalist based in Moscow. We'll continue this discussion. Let's look at a couple of minutes of the documentary that is 30 minutes long. We'll roll a little bit more of that, and then we'll take a couple of telephone calls.
Жизнь? Да чтоб я так жил. Не дай Бог, чтоб дети росли совками в этой рабской стране. Делай свою работу. Да уже многие потеряли. И во всяком случае, какой-либо смысл в работе потеряли все. Так что стоим. Друзья все здесь. Нормально. Стоим. И я не могу не сказать о том, что там на баррикадах стояли сотрудники нашего кабельного телевидения. Слава Беспалов, Женя Большухин, Володя Бука. Там был водитель нашей съемочной группы Никита Добия, диспетчер нашей студии Алла Сандлер. Я, наверное, не всех назвал. Наверное, там были и другие ребята с нашего кабельного телевидения, я просто не знаю. Оператор Кирилл Челяпов снимал там для российского телевидения. И этот материал уже был во всесоюзном эфире. И Юра Мельников там снимал. Он отснял чрезвычайную сессию Верховного Совета России. На всякий случай. Мало ли, как оно дальше сложится. И я тоже там был. И у меня создалось впечатление, что защитники прессу не очень-то жалуют. Вот посмотрите.
Почему? За что же так?
Пресс сказали не пропускать. Пресс.
Ни в коем случае.
Продажную желтую прессу. Проводите нас туда. Нельзя. Ребята, времени нет. Нет. Приводи меня вот туда, мы выйдем. Ну давай. Что ты проводишь? Проходи, что ты ставишь. Я провожу их.
Он меня проводит. И все.
Вот такие вот серьезные дяди, защитники.
Вот туда вы, вот.
Кстати, говорят, что в первый же день, в понедельник, к Белому дому съехались в большом количестве никто иной, как ракетиры, и предложили свои услуги. Ну, в смысле вооруженной защиты. И знаете, в это действительно можно поверить. Потому что при хунте уж кто-кто, а они точно лишились бы работы. Да и потом, они ведь тоже люди. Тоже граждане.
Маленькое такое интервью для независимого телевидения Южного округа. Вот Кирилл вам будет задавать вопросы, а вы попробуйте на них ответить. Они простые.
Лен, вот вы единственная девушка в таком отряде, который мало того, что стоит на танкоопасном направлении, как говорят, кроме того, он еще прикомандирован к штабу, в случае необходимости его куда-нибудь еще и перебросить могут. Еще более танкоопасное направление. Не страшно?
Нет.
А почему вот вы решили пойти в такое, в общем, достаточно мужское дело?
Но я считаю, это дело не только мужское, это дело всех женщин, которые более-менее как-то освобождены. Но освобождена опять в каком смысле? У меня вот дома ребенок, я его оставила с мамой. Когда, в общем-то, стал решаться такой вопрос, ехать или не ехать, я тут же решила поехать.
Нет, ну ехать это одно, а в общем, в такое,
Documentary made by the Ekron cable TV channel in Moscow. Any reaction to what you're seeing?
No, I think it's great. I want to see a lot more of it. I want to figure out ways to make sure that it happens throughout all of the republics.
Do you have any reaction to what you're saying?
No, it's just a very great achievement made by our local cable TV studio crew, that they have a memory now what has happened in August, and there were also many independent crews from local studios which are growing up in Moscow now, and they also have their own private documentary, and someday we can put it together, and it will be a great movie about what has happened in August.
By the way, if you've just joined us, Steve Effros is the president of the Community Antenna Community Antenna Television Association. I'm losing it. And Vitaly Shamov is here in this country for the last 5 days, first visit to the United States. Watertown, South Dakota, go ahead, please.
Hello. I'd like to address this more to Vitaly than anybody else on your panel this evening. First, I have a question. You talk about cable TV in what used to be the USSR. Are the cable TV companies that are over there, are they privately owned, government owned, or where does the ownership lie?
Thanks.
As far as I understood, he asks about who owns them, yeah?
Who owns them, yeah. And as a matter of fact, they don't want to step in here, but Steve Effros spent a lot of time with that issue. Maybe we ought to let him try a crack at that, because I know that you don't consider yourself an expert on cable television systems. But Steve, why don't you give it your, and then we'll get Vitaly's reaction to what you say.
There's many efforts to start private cable systems right now in the Soviet Union. The ones that are in existence now, a few of them are private. They are usually in small districts and high residence areas, residential blocks of buildings, and they originally were built by the government. But then again, the government owned the buildings as well, and all of that is changing right now. So it's not easy to say who owns what or who licenses what.
Do you know of any place in the Commonwealth of Independent States where it's getting there?
It's tough.
Where there is a multi-channel cable system of more than, say, 6 channels?
Yeah, in St. Petersburg, they're now in the process of building one in a section of the city, and I think there are 7 different franchises that have been granted, and they're in the process of building it now. I think the same is true in some parts of Moscow, but not all parts of Moscow.
How many channels will there be on there?
At the beginning, they're using the technology that we started with, and they're going to be 20-channel systems probably. Right now, they'll only have maybe 4 or 5 activated channels.
New Orleans, go ahead, please.
Yeah, first of all, from the system that Vitaly is connected to, the technology sounds like what we call, or what's a multi-point distribution system, a microwave multi-point distribution system, or what's called wireless cable. Right. But what I wanted to say, compliment C-SPAN. Your coverage of the Soviet media over the past year is the best thing that you've done in many years.
Thanks.
That's the big story that the other American media are virtually ignoring. I think the media is what runs that country. That's the only thing that's left organized in the country is the media, or independent as it is. I have to say, and I hope you take this as a constructive criticism, the worst thing that C-SPAN has done in the past year is abandonment of your policy, your former policy of non-duplication of other cable channels, namely CNN. It started during the Gulf War when you cut away from let's say, King Hussein's speech to a Pentagon group briefing that was being carried live by CNN, and then the morning of Anita Hill's testimony, you, Brian, made a commitment to rebroadcast Anita Hill's testimony as the C-SPAN event of the day. Therefore, I did not videotape it for my use. And then you went back on that commitment and just carried the Clarence Thomas hearings live with your rolling opinion poll with the phone calls during the recent.
Well, I'm not sure. We never carried a speech by King Hussein.
You did, and you cut away from it.
No, we did. There's no way for us to get it. We didn't have it.
Well, maybe.
I think you're thinking of CNN, because we did not carry King Hussein. That speech was carried on CNN from Jordan. The other thing was that we carried everything of the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill hearings in its entirety, both live and on tape, a couple of times.
Days later, yes. I was anyway, the day of Anita Hill's testimony, I still haven't seen her whole testimony.
Okay, thanks for the call.
There may be, on the issue that the caller raised right in the beginning, I think there should be a clarification, and that is that we here are very careful to distinguish between cable television and broadcast television and master antenna television, and what he was talking about, multi-point distribution service. Those distinctions are not made yet in the in the former Soviet Union and the Commonwealth. When we talk about independent media over there, we're talking about any media. The distinction that is drawn, unlike here where the cable boys are fighting against the broadcasters who are fighting against the telephone company and so on, in terms of the various technologies, over there the distinction independent is from the state. And it doesn't matter whether it's broadcast or cable or multi-point. It's just getting information out to the people in a manner that is not controlled by the state.
By the way, the program coming up is no longer called TV Inform. The name has changed as of the 1st of January, or as of today, possibly. It's called News One. Those of you who followed the change from Vremya to TV Inform to News One. Before I take this next call, this is your first appearance on American television. Correct. Is this the first time you've ever been on television?
Yes.
What do you think of the experience?
It's very